Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about the digestive system, and I'm going to point out the structures that you need to know in the digestive models. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, this is the first model that we're going to look at, and in this one you have this space here. This space is called the nasal cavity, and then you have this space here in the mouth. This space is called the oral cavity. We will talk about the nasal cavities and structures related to it in our respiratory unit, so we're not going to talk about the nasal cavity in this video. But we are going to talk about the oral cavity, so let's get started right there. Okay, the opening to the oral cavity is going to be the lips. Behind the lips you have the teeth, and then you have this large muscle in the mouth called the tongue. So lips, teeth, tongue. Now, dividing your nasal cavity from your oral cavity, you have this bony structure here. This area is called the hard palate because the bone is hard. So hard palate is the roof of the mouth. So if you stick your tongue up in the top of the mouth, the roof, you will feel a very hard area there. That is your hard palate. Now, if you push your tongue to the very back of the roof of the mouth, you'll feel that it gets a little softer right here. This is considered the soft palate. And then dangling down from the soft palate is this structure called the uvula. So if you're ever in the doctor and they go open wide and you go, oh, you can see that little dangly structure hanging down from the roof of the mouth. That is your uvula. So again, the hard palate is the bony area. Behind or posterior to the hard palate and a little bit inferior, you have the soft palate. And then hanging down from the soft palate, you have the uvula. Now this long tube right here that we call the throat, this entire throat structure is called the pharynx. Now the pharynx can be subdivided into three specific areas. At the top right here, behind the nasal cavity, you have the nasopharynx. Behind the oral cavity, this area, specific area of the pharynx is called the oropharynx, behind the oral cavity. And then down here, this area, our specific area of the pharynx, which is behind the larynx, is called the laryngopharynx. So again, this entire structure is called the pharynx. The three subdivisions or specific areas are called the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx. Now we talked about the tonsils a couple of units ago, but those are still applicable in this unit as well. And to just refresh your memory, at the top of the pharynx, we have the pharyngeal tonsil. Then just inferior to your soft palate, you have the pharyngeal tonsil. And then under the tongue here, you have the lingual tonsil. So remember, lingual, if you're bilingual, you can speak two tongues. Okay, so lingual is going to refer to the tongue. So this tonsil here under the tongue is called the lingual tonsil. Now, in this structure here, this is your larynx. And we're going to talk more about this in the respiratory unit, but I wanted to point out a few structures. This flap structure here is called the epiglottis. Epi, if you remember, means to sit upon or sit just above. So this epiglottis is going to sit just above this opening called the glottis. And the function of this epiglottis is to close shut when you're trying to swallow food or drink, so that the food and drink doesn't go down into the trachea, which will then lead to the lungs. You don't want food and drink in the lungs, so you have to have this flap here called the epiglottis, which is going to close that opening off and will force food and drink to go down the back of the throat and lead into the esophagus here. So right down here, you would have the esophagus beginning right here. Okay, now we're going to go to our next model. So the next model we have here, forgive me, it's a little bit heavy. In this model, you have the all of the structures that we just talked about in the head area of this model. So up here you would have the hard palate right here, the soft palate, and the uvula. You have the oral cavity, so that's that space in the mouth. You have the lips, the teeth, and the tongue. You also have here, you can see the palatine tonsil and the lingual tonsil. Here's your pharyngeal tonsil way up at the top of the pharynx. And remember, all of this is your pharynx. Okay, that's your throat. And your pharynx can be subdivided into 3 areas. Behind the nasal cavity, you have the nasopharynx. Behind the oral cavity, you have the oropharynx. And behind the larynx here, you have the laryngopharynx. Now, at the bottom of the laryngopharynx, you will now enter into the esophagus. So this long organ here is considered the esophagus. Then the food will go into the stomach. So here you're seeing the stomach. From the stomach, you're going to go into the first part of the small intestines here. So the first part of the small intestines is up here. The rest of the small intestines is down here. Then the food will go into the large intestines. The waste will come out into this rectum, and then we'll go out the opening here, which is called the anus. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk more in depth about the stomach. The stomach has specific areas in there. So right here where you have the esophagus leading into the stomach, this specific area of the stomach is called the cardia. Your heart would be sitting right here. So this is the area closest to the heart, the cardia. Now this area here where you're going up and then you go back down, if you'll think about roller coasters, people consider roller coasters extremely fun because you're going up, you go to the very top, and then you dive down. So roller coasters are fun because of the going up and then the diving down. So this area right here is called the fundus. Okay, so think roller coasters are very fun. This area is the fundus. All of this here is the body of the stomach. And this specific area here is called the pylorus. So specific areas are the cardia, the fundus, the body, and the pylorus. We're going to possibly pop this stomach open. You'll see all of these folds in here. These folds are called rugae. Okay? They're throughout the whole interior of the stomach, and these are called your rugae. Here at the end of the stomach, leading into the first segment of the small intestines, you have this muscular opening right here. And that muscular opening can close the stomach shut so that that food churns around in that stomach. And when that food gets to a certain consistency, that pyloric sphincter here, or that opening, will open up and allow that food to go down into the small intestine. So this muscular opening closing area right here is called the pyloric sphincter. Because remember, this area, this specific area of the stomach, was called the pylorus. So this muscular layer here that opens and closes the base of the stomach is called the pyloric sphincter. So again, then the food, when it's a mushy consistency, will enter this first part of the small intestine. And I'm going to remove part of the large intestine here so you can see it better. This first segment of the small intestine is called the duodenum or duodenum. It'll be pronounced 2 different ways. So duodenum or duodenum. I say duodenum when you're trying to spell it on your lab test. So it's much easier to spell when you pronounce it duodenum. So that's the first segment of the small intestines. This middle area of the small intestines is going to be the jejunum. And this last segment area of the small intestine is called the ileum. So again, all of this is the small intestines. The first part is called the duodenum. The middle area is called the jejunum. And the bottom area here is called the ileum. Now in this small intestine. That ileum is going to then dump that food into this pocket of the large intestines. This pocket right here is called the cecum. So again, you have the ileum, which will then pass the food to the cecum of the large intestines. It does so by opening this valve here called the ileocecal valve. It's called ileo from the ileum, cecal from the cecum, ileocecal valve right here. Okay. At the end of the beginning, actually, this little tail from the beginning of the large intestines, this is your appendix. Okay. So it's going to be a tail-like extension off of the large intestines. Okay, let me reassemble this guy and we will talk about the large intestines. Okay, so we already talked about the small intestines passing the food to the pocket here called the cecum through the ileocecal valve. The food will then travel up this part of the intestines, large intestines, and it will go across and then down this way. Now, your large intestines can also be called your colon. So if the food is going up this side is considered the ascending, going up, the ascending or ascending colon, okay, ascending colon. The food product will then go across this area. This is called your transverse colon. Then the food will go down this side. So this side's called the descending colon. Then as the colon curves around right here, this is called your sigmoid colon. So again, this pocket is called your cecum. The food will go up. So this is your ascending colon, across the transverse colon, down the descending colon, and through the curved part of the colon called the sigmoid colon. Now you'll see your large intestines here have each of these individual little pockets or bubbles. Each of these is called a haustra. So each of these bubbles or pockets would be called a haustra. H-A-U-S-T-R-A. Okay. Then you have all of the nutrients that are absorbed by the body here. Then your large intestines are going to be taking out any excess water, and they will be packaging the waste in a solid form. And so that waste will then be dumped here into the rectum. So that's going to be the poop, okay, that you're getting rid of. So the poop or the waste will be deposited in this rectum, and then it will go out the opening called the anus. Now I'm going to try to hold this where you can see it a little bit better. Okay, so here's the rectum, and then the hole here's the anus. Now you have this thin band of muscular tissue here and here. These are called your internal anal sphincters. So each of these skinny bands of muscular tissue here are the internal anal sphincters. Then you have this thick band on either side. This thick band of muscular tissue, that is called your external anal sphincters. Okay. Now let's talk about the liver. Okay, the liver is pictured here. So your liver is a brick red organ, and it has this little green sac underneath it. This is your gallbladder. So your gallbladder is going to sit inferior or just to the bottom of the liver. Now the liver itself has 4 lobes. Sorry guys, I'm having a camera issue here. Okay, so the largest lobe is the right lobe of the liver. Second largest is the left lobe of the liver. Then you have this 4-sided rectangular lobe here. This is called your quadrate lobe. So if you have ever ridden a 4x4, it's called a quad because it has 4 wheels. So the quadrate lobe has 4 sides. Quad means 4. So this square or rectangular lobe here is called your quadrate lobe. Your quadrate lobe is always going to sit right next to your gallbladder. Then you have this little tail lobe here that always sits by your inferior vena cava. This tail lobe here is called your caudate lobe. So if you remember from our landmark unit, the first part of A&P1, your tail landmark would be called your caudate. So caudate means towards the tail. So here's your caudate lobe, always by that inferior vena cava. Okay, and again, this is your gallbladder. We will talk about these ducts from a picture a little bit later on, but this is how they go. This is, down here is your common bile duct. Your common bile duct will then separate or divide into the cystic duct. Your cystic duct is going to lead to the gallbladder. You can remember this because this gallbladder looks almost like a cyst growth on the underneath of the liver. So the duct that goes to this cyst-looking organ would be called your cystic duct. So common bile duct is then going to split into the cystic duct, and then on this side it would be called the common hepatic duct, and the common hepatic duct is going to split into the left and right hepatic ducts. So common bile duct, cystic duct, right here would be the common hepatic duct, and then your left and right hepatic ducts. And again, we'll go over this in a picture where it's a little bit clearer in a moment. Okay, this organ right here, this is going to be your pancreas. The specific area here is the head of the pancreas. Specific area here is the body of the pancreas. And over here you have the tail of the pancreas. You have this white tube area right here. This is your pancreatic duct. And each one of these little bubbles in the pancreas look like fish egg sacs. Each one of these is called a lobule or a pancreatic lobule. Okay, and that's this model. Now we're going to go to our large torso model. Oh, Lordy. Okay, so remember this torso guy. You've seen him throughout almost every unit we have. So here you'll see the heart and the lungs. And then just inferior to that, you have the liver, the gallbladder, the stomach, the small intestines, the large intestines, also called the colon. You have each of the bubble pockets of the large intestines called the haustra. Then you have the ileum, which is the last segment of small intestines. You have the ileocecal valve leading to the cecum of the large intestines. That's that little pocket. Okay, so again, liver, gallbladder, stomach, large intestines or colon, small intestines, ileocecal valve. Okay. I'm going to take the liver and the stomach out here, and we're going to look at those a little bit further. Okay, so again, this is our stomach, and we have the same specific areas of the stomach that we looked at just a minute ago. You have the body of the stomach here. This specific area, right as the esophagus comes into the stomach, this is called your cardia. Remember, your heart would sit right here. So this cardia area is going to be the area closest to the heart, okay, cardia. This area up here, where you have like the roller coaster, remember going up is really fun because then it pauses and then you dive down. So this area right here is called the fundus, okay? So all of that specific area right there is called the fundus. This specific area, the last area of the stomach, this is called your pylorus. You can see you have a large curve here. This is called your greater curvature. And here you have the smaller curve. This is called your smaller curvature. When we open up this stomach, you can see the wrinkles are folds, which are called your rugae. And you have this muscular opening, closing area right here called the pyloric sphincter. Okay, now looking at the liver, I'll position it this way because this is the way you saw it on the previous model. So the largest lobe here is the right lobe. The next, second largest, is the left lobe. The square or rectangular lobe here, remember 4 sides, is called the quadrate lobe, always by the gallbladder. Quadrate lobe, always by the gallbladder. Then you have this little tail lobe here, always by the inferior vena cava. This tail lobe here is called the caudate lobe. Remember, caudate means tail. Okay, this is called your gallbladder. Remember, it looks similar to a cyst. So this duct leading to the gallbladder is called your cystic duct. Right here you have your common bile duct. Your common bile duct is going to split to your cystic duct, and right here to your common hepatic duct. And then your common hepatic duct is going to split to your right and left hepatic ducts. This right here, this white or opaque looking ligament here is called your falciform ligament. Okay, falciform ligament. You can see it between your left lobe and your quadrate lobe. Okay. Okay. Now we're going to look again at the pancreas from the intestines that I just pulled out of that big torso guy. So here you're going to see the pancreas. This would be the head of the pancreas, the body of the pancreas, and the tail of the pancreas. The white pancreatic duct right here, and each one of these little bubbles is called a pancreatic lobule. Okay. This would be the first area of the small intestines, or the specific area of the small intestines called the duodenum. Here is going to be your jejunum, specific area, the middle of your small intestines, and this specific area of the small intestines called your ileum. Okay, we can flip this over and you'll see that you have your colon here. At the end of this colon, or the end of this ascending colon, this little tail structure here is called the appendix. Okay. Okay, next we're going to look at this model. This model is showing our, sorry guys, this model is showing the microscopic view of the liver. So each one of these pentagon or hexagon shapes is called a liver lobule. So you have one here, one here, one here, and then you have some that you're only seeing partial lobules, okay? So again, each one of these hexagon or pentagon shapes is called a liver lobule. In the center of each liver lobule, you'll see the central vein. And we're going to take this liver lobule here and we're going to blow him up right here. So you're seeing this liver lobule blown up. So this would be your central vein right here. Each one of these canals are called a sinusoid or a liver sinusoid. And then you will see individual cells here on this. These are called hepatocytes, each one of these cells. Hepata means liver and cyte means cell. So hepatocyte actually means a liver cell. So each one of these would be considered a hepatocyte. And here again you see your sinusoid, your liver sinusoid. Okay. Here we have a model depicting the layers in the digestive tract. And you have 4 main areas of the digestive tract. You have this first area here. All of this would be considered your esophagus. The second area is your stomach. The third area here is your small intestines. And the last layer here is your large intestines or your colon. So again, esophagus, stomach, small intestines, large intestines. In each of these, you have layers, and the layers are the same, okay? They're the same layers in each area. The first layer here is going to be where you have the little finger extensions. This, from this little muscular layer to the inside of the lumen, is considered your mucosal layer. One thing to remember here, because I used a term I don't know if y'all remember, when you're looking down a tube like the esophagus, the inside of that tube, that space in the inside, is called a lumen, okay? So here you're seeing the inside of the tube, so this would be the lumen, or the opening space in the center of that tube. So looking between my fingers here, from here to here, this is the mucosal layer. Again, from this band, so you see that little muscular band right here, all the way to the lumen is called your mucosa. And then in the small intestines here, from this band all the way into the lumen, that is your mucosa. And in the large intestines, from this band right here all the way to the lumen is also the mucosa. Okay. The second layer, going just deep of the mucosa, this white band right here on every one of them, is the submucosa. This white band here. Submucosa literally means under the mucosa. Sub means under. So this white band is under this mucosa, so it's called the submucosa. Now going out from the submucosa, you see two layers of muscle tissue here. Both of these layers together is called the Muscularis Externa. So here's the Muscularis Externa in the esophagus. Here is both of these bands together, called the Muscularis Externa in the stomach. Both of these muscular bands together in the small intestines, again, is called the Muscularis Externa. And then down here in the large intestines, you have, again, the two different muscle layers here called the Muscularis Externa. This outer white band with the outside quote-unquote skin of the digestive tract is called the serosa. So that white band plus the little outer pink band here is the serosa. In the small intestines, here again, the white band and the outside pink band together is your serosa. Here in the esophagus, the white band and the pink band out here, the serosa. And here you, in the esophagus, you see the white band, and then you have this outside pink band. That makes up the serosa. So mucosa, submucosa, Muscularis Externa, and serosa. Those are the layers of tissues in the digestive system. Okay, so the last model we have is going to be our teeth. So in our teeth, remember you have the 4 flat front teeth. Those flat front teeth, you have 4 on top and 4 on bottom. The flat ones are called your incisors. And you'll see here they're very flat looking. Those are your incisors. Then on either side of the incisors, on top and bottom, you have the teeth that have that large 1 point. These are called your cuspids. A cusp is a point or an edge. So in your cuspids, you only have 1 edge. Okay, you only have 1 cuspid on each side of the top and bottom. Again, these would be considered your canines, okay? But in our lab, we have to call them cuspids. Going back from the cuspids, you have these teeth that have 2 points. These are called your bicuspids. So 2 is called bi, cusp is a point. So in these with 2 points, the 2 teeth behind your canine or your cuspid tooth is called your bicuspid. You have 2 bicuspids. Behind your bicuspids, you're going to have these teeth that have 4 points. These are called your molars, okay? And you have 3 of those molar teeth. Okay, so now we're going to take this tooth and we're going to talk about the different regions of this tooth, or different areas. Okay, this part of the tooth that sticks up above the gum line, this is called your crown. Okay, so your crown is going to be the part of the teeth that you can see. Okay, so that's your crown. At the gum line, where your tooth goes into the gum line, this is called your neck. And then below the gum line, this is considered the root. This is going to go beneath the gums and into the bone. So again, the three areas are going to be the crown. That's all of this area right here where my hand's over. That's your crown. You have this area right here that's going into the gum line. This is called your neck. And then all of this underneath the gum line going into the tooth is called the root. We're going to take this tooth apart. I think. There we go. Okay, so now you're going to see the three layers of the tooth. The white layer, that is the very hard layer that you normally brush with your toothbrush and you floss between. This layer is called the enamel. Then you see you have this yellow tan area right here. This is called your dentin. And then you have the very soft inside layer called the pulp, or the pulp cavity. The pulp cavity is going to lead to the root canal down here. And this root canal is going to allow the blood vessels and the nerves to come into the tooth. Because your tooth is a living tissue, so you have to have a blood supply going into that into that living tissue. So again, this root canal down here is going to allow those blood vessels and those nerves to come into the tooth. The gums that sit around the tooth is called your gingiva. If you have an inflammation of this gingiva, it's called gingivitis, because remember, itis means inflammation. So gingivitis means an inflammation of the gingiva, or the gums around the tooth. Now around the root of the tooth, you have a ligament. This ligament is called the periodontal ligament. This ligament is going to hold the root of the tooth into the bone. And remember, peri means around, and dontal means tooth. So if you go to the orthodontist, he's a tooth specialist. Okay, so your periodontal ligament, peri means around, dontal means tooth. So your periodontal ligament goes around the root of the tooth. Okay, and it holds that tooth in place within that bone. Okay, so those are the models that you need to know for the digestive system. So we're going to end this recording here, and I'll have another one where I'm quizzing you on the different parts of the digestive system. So I'll ask you the questions just like you would see them on a practical. So until next time, good studying.